So I was talking to Dale at Tractor Stuff, and he noticed that I hadn't ordered any parts for the countershaft. So I told him that I saw a crack in the housing and I was going to leave it alone, and I was kind of afraid to drive it out. And he suggested that I go ahead, that he didn't think that it would damage the housing, and that oftentimes the countershaft will wear down, the bearings will go bad, and it causes further damage in the countershaft gear. So I went ahead and opened it up. The instructions in the service manual just to say just to drive the countershaft from the box. And so first I looked at where the countershaft would come out, and so I took a look at the box. Here, where I removed the gasket previously, where it meets the range housing, I already removed the gasket, but this side I hadn't removed the gasket yet. So I decided to go ahead and tear it off. It wasn't that easy to tear off, so I got my trusty flathead screwdriver and started to pry underneath. If you can get under a corner pretty well and use the screwdriver to sort of pry up from the bottom, from the outside in, then you can get a larger piece of it. But I got just enough now that I've been able to expose that countershaft. This entire gasket will have to be removed and cleaned up and replaced. There was some rust on the end of the countershaft, and so I decided to squirt it with a little bit of WD-40 and use a wire brush to clean it off so I can get a better look at what's going on down here. Once I wiped it off, it revealed the reason why I wasn't able to just hammer it on through, because there's 2 hex nuts in those holes there that you see. I'm going to get you a closer up view here, and in those 2 holes there's some hex nuts. So once I removed these hex nuts, the shaft jiggled a little bit. I could jiggle it and the plate was moving, so I stood it up on its end so that I could press the shaft from the other side, and it started coming out very easily. There was no need to drive it at all. But when I pulled it out the way that I had it, the thrust washer fell out. So then I turned it right side up so that I could grab a hold of the gear and pull it up so that it wasn't at an angle, and I was able to get the shaft out of the center of the countershaft gear. So I just grabbed a hold of it as best as I could and pulled it out. Tried to show it, but it's difficult to hold the camera and do this at the same time. Anyway, there's my countershaft, and there's my countershaft gear. When I started cleaning it up, I noticed that there was some rust on the countershaft, and also that there were 2 thin washers on the left side with the thrust bearing, 2 thin washers, and there's a thick one that stayed on the inside of the case. But on the right side, there was just the one thick one with the bearing. So apparently they took part number 4 and put 2 of them on the left, and neither of them were on the right. You can see a little close up here is just the bearing and the thicker washer. I think that's part number 6, and 2 number 4s are on the left. So here we've got a little bit of rust on our shaft, quite a bit of rust on the head of that shaft, which is a separate part. We've got needles falling out when I was cleaning the gear, and they fell out, which caused a little bit of wear, and some broken teeth on the countershaft gear, which is exactly why you would want to replace these parts to prevent damage on the significantly more expensive gear. $50 worth of thrust washers and bearings might prevent more costly replacement of like a $300 countershaft gear. So thanks for recommending that I pull this gear, or I would never have found these parts that need to be replaced and prevent damage in the future. Thanks, Dale.